a pitch-black ocean. Deep beneath the dark waves lies the crumpled wreckage of a massive battleship, covered in rust, silt, and sea life. The camera slowly drifts upward as vintage black-and-white footage flickers on screen. December 7th, 1941. Pearl Harbor engulfed in thick smoke. Explosions and raging fireballs. A narrow, treacherous stretch of water in the Philippine archipelago known as the Surigao Strait. A graveyard-like silence hangs over the water. But behind this mask of absolute darkness, history's most formidable naval trap is being meticulously laid. In just a few hours, an event will unfold here that has never been seen before in human history, and will never be witnessed again. This was to be the final surface engagement between battleships. But this story carries an extraordinary twist. The American battleships waiting in perfect formation at the mouth of the Surigao Strait were the very same ships that Japan had blasted into smoking ruins 3 years earlier at Pearl Harbor. USS West Virginia, USS Maryland, USS Tennessee, USS California, USS Pennsylvania. Japan believed they had sent these leviathans to the bottom of the sea forever. But they were wrong. America resurrected these twisted masses of steel from the mud, outfitted them with cutting-edge radar, and tonight, these ghosts of the past were waiting in the shadows to claim their total vengeance. Time was running out. America had launched Operation King II to liberate the Philippines and cut off Japan's vital resource supply lines from the Dutch East Indies. General Douglas MacArthur had stepped ashore on the beaches of Leyte, famously declaring, "I have returned." If America secured this foothold, the Japanese Empire's defeat was absolute and certain. In a desperate bid to avert disaster, Japanese Admiral Soimu Toyoda devised a complex, plot naval counteroffensive Operation Sho-1. The strategy was incredibly daring and heavily reliant on deception. Japan sent its remaining aircraft carriers, now largely emptied of experienced pilots, as a sacrificial decoy to lure Admiral William Bull Halsey's powerful American Third Fleet away to the north. Halsey took the bait hook, line, and sinker, charging northward with his massive carriers and leaving the vital transport area of Leyte Gulf completely exposed. 2 powerful Japanese surface forces were ordered to converge on Leyte Gulf from 2 different directions, pin down thousands of vulnerable American troops and defenseless landing ships on the beaches, and obliterate them with heavy artillery. From the north, Vice Admiral Takayo Kurita was advancing with the colossal battleship Yamato through the San Bernardino Strait, while from the south, Vice Admiral Shoshi Nishimura was steaming ahead toward the Surigao Strait. Command of the Southern Force rested with Vice Admiral Shoshi Nishimura, a seasoned, stern, and deeply experienced officer who knew the stakes of the operation. He commanded to aging but exceptionally powerful battleships, his flagship Yamashiro and the Fuso. They were accompanied by the heavy cruiser Mogami and 4 destroyers. Nishimura knew this could well be a one-way mission, a final kamikaze charge of heavy steel. His force entered the narrow waters of the Surigao Strait under the cover of night. The strait was only a few miles wide, flanked on both sides by mountainous islands that blocked any escape routes. The night was so profoundly dark that navigating without advanced radar was almost impossible, forcing the Japanese ships into a rigid line. Nishimura had no idea that at the far end of this narrow bottleneck, a colossal jaw of death stood wide open. American Rear Admiral Jesse Oldendorf had transformed this long strait into a literal valley of death, a tactical meat grinder from which no enemy could escape alive. Oldendorf's defensive plan comprised three distinct, escalating layers. The first layer consisted of 39 PT boats, small, fast, wooden patrol torpedo boats, hiding in the dark bays and inlets along the islands. The lead PT boat spotted Nishimura's column through binoculars. "Enemy sighted," crackled over the radio. The PT boats used the cover of darkness to launch torpedoes at the massive Japanese hulls. However, against the thick steel armor of the battleships, these small torpedoes did virtually no damage. The Japanese gunners instantly illuminated the night by turning on their massive searchlights, turning darkness into blinding day. A barrage of 14-inch and 6-inch shells tore through the water, forcing the PT boats to retreat, though several were destroyed. Believing he had successfully repelled the primary American threat, Nishimura messaged his headquarters, advancing while destroying enemy torpedo boats. This was his fatal mistake. The primary objective of the PT boats was not to sink the Japanese fleet. It was to feed Admiral Oldendorf the exact speed, direction, and position of the oncoming force. The first phase of the trap had worked perfectly. Then came the second layer of defense. The strait narrowed significantly, forcing Nishimura's ships into a tight single-file column due to the restricted navigable water. Suddenly, out of the darkness emerged two large groups of American destroyers. Under the command of Captain Jesse Coward and Captain Smoot, these destroyers advanced in absolute silence. They did not activate their searchlights. They did not fire a single gun. They didn't need to because they possessed advanced radar. They could see through the pitch black. When the distance closed to just 8,000 yards, the American destroyers unleashed a massive, coordinated salvo of lethal torpedoes into the water. Immediately after firing, they deployed thick smoke screens to mask their withdrawal. Beneath the surface, Steel Death raced at 45 knots toward the Japanese battleships. The Japanese remained completely unaware until the sea exploded violently. The pervasive darkness of the strait was violently shattered by a massive, blinding explosion. A torpedo, meticulously loosed from the USS Melvin, struck the Japanese battleship Fuso dead center. The detonation ripped through Fuso's forward ammunition magazines, splitting the 30,000-ton Leviathan completely in half. Both sections remained ablaze, drifting independently as they slowly succumbed to the sea. It was an unbelievable blow. The main engagement had not even begun, and Japan had already lost one of its primary battleships. But the destruction did not stop there. Torpedoes from other destroyer groups tore through Vice Admiral Nishimura's screening force. The attack sank 3 destroyers, the Yamagumo, Michishio, and Asaguma, leaving them either fatally crippled or resting on the ocean floor. Nishimura's flagship, the Yamashiro, was also struck by a torpedo. However, her heavy armor held, and she continued pressing forward through the damage, refusing to deviate from the mission. Nishimura ordered his remaining forces, the cruiser Mogami and the destroyer Shiger, to press on, transmitting, "Follow me. Leyte Gulf is not far ahead." Like a wounded lion, he charged blindly toward his fate. Nishimura was now approaching the exit of the Surigao Strait. Waiting for him was the final, and most lethal layer of the American trap, the American battle line. In naval warfare, there is a classic textbook tactical maneuver known as crossing the T. It represents the ultimate ambition of any surface fleet commander. If an enemy force approaches in a straight column, a vertical line, and you position your warships horizontally across the path of that column, you form the top bar of a T. This position yields a massive tactical advantage. The ships forming the horizontal bar can train all of their broadside guns fore aft and midships directly on the narrow profile of the enemy column. Conversely, the advancing enemy column can only utilize its forwardmost guns, while its trailing ships have their lines of sight completely obscured by the vessels. Ahead of them, Rear Admiral Jesse Oldendorf had perfectly crossed Nishimura's T. Positioned in a flawless horizontal line across the strait were 6 United States battleships and 8 heavy cruisers. Every single 14-inch, 16-inch barrel was trained directly on the already battered Yamashiro. The modern fire control radar aboard the USS West Virginia locked onto the Yamashiro at a distance of 22,800 yards. The fire controlman pulled the trigger. A thunderous roar echoed across the water as the West Virginia's 16-inch guns fired their first salvo. Massive, 2,000-pound armor-piercing shells tore through the night sky. In rapid succession, the USS Tennessee and USS California opened fire. Within seconds, thousands of tons of high explosives rained down from above. This was no ordinary bombardment. It was the ultimate retribution for Pearl Harbor. A tempest of fire engulfed the Yamashiro. American cruisers, including the USS Louisville, Portland, and Minneapolis, unleashed a relentless torrent from their rapid-fire 8-inch guns, making the sea look as if it were lit by a continuous fountain of fire. The captain of the Yamashiro later noted that the incoming shells hit with such speed and intensity that counting them was impossible. The ship's steel melted, the distinctive pagoda mast collapsed, and the entire interior became an inferno. Despite this catastrophic damage, the wounded Yamashiro stubbornly fought back, firing her forward guns. However, without advanced radar, her shells missed blindly in the blackness. Vice Admiral Nishimura's final radio transmission crackled from his devastated bridge. "We are receiving heavy fire from all sides, but we will continue to advance." Those were his last words. Minutes later, another coordinated torpedo attack extinguished any remaining hope for the flagship. The magnificent Japanese battleship rolled over and sank into the depths of the strait, taking her entire crew and Admiral Nishimura with her. The cruiser Mogami was heavily damaged and burning out of control, but her captain managed to turn the vessel around and slip away into the darkness, though she would be hunted down and sunk by American aircraft the following morning. Of the entire Southern Force, only a single vessel survived unscathed, the destroyer Shigure. Her captain later wrote, "We miraculously escaped the jaws of death, leaving behind a sea filled with the blood of our comrades and burning oil." The Battle of Surigao Strait was over. Japan's strategic plan to strike Leyte Gulf from the south was permanently shattered. The United States Navy had delivered a decisive, crushing blow using the very battleships Japan had once tried to destroy at Pearl Harbor. This engagement earned a unique place in naval history. It stands as the final time in human history that opposing battleships engaged one another directly with heavy artillery. Following this battle, naval warfare shifted irrevocably toward missiles, aircraft carriers, and jet aviation. The battleships that had ruled the oceans for generations saw their era draw to a definitive close that night. The trap at Surigao Strait was more than just a tactical victory. It was a profound act of military retribution and the final curtain call for a grand era of naval warfare.